And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes, and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on podcastufo.com. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the first show of the year. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have a good one for you this evening. We have repeat guests, author of The Stalking of the Herd, as well as some other books on the mysterious San Luis Valley, Christopher O'Brien. And we'll be talking about subjects of his books. Plus, we're going to talk about some ancient, possibly extraterrestrial depictions in art and a lot more. Before our guest, we have Alejandro Rojas coming up with the UFO news in just a few minutes. And I have to mention this for a while, unfortunately, so pardon me if you've heard this a couple of times already, but if you've not been able to tune in for the last few weeks, our shows are now live on podcastufo.com and will be from now on. It's possible we may be going on also at the same time on another network, but we're no longer on the Dark Matter Digital Network, not live, that is. We are in a new time slot, which will be recorded shows as this show here, will be on Thursdays at 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which I believe is 6 to 8, unless I'm getting that wrong, Pacific Time. And I want to give a quick shout-out to Keith Rowland. He's not listening because this is a pre-recorded show when it's on his site. But Keith Rowland put together the Dark Matter Digital Network and brought me on as one of the, I think I'm the longest-lasting show that was on his network live, and it's been really, really great. He put in a lot of hard work, 2+ years in the making, to build that up for Art Bell, who had to leave. And well, I will tell you, it's not the end of the network. Heather Wade is in Art Bell's driver's seat. She's doing a good job, in my opinion. And you can still listen to Midnight in the Desert with all the great guests over there, but it would be Heather Wade doing the interviewing. Art may step in now and then, but no promises for that. All right, so on this website, don't forget to, while you're listening live, that is, to jump into the chat room. You can join in the conversation on this site, or you can pose questions for the guest. And we also take calls after the first half hour, and you may want to write this down. That's 603-967-4030. The show is always 100% free when it's live, so keep that in mind. And it's going to be possibly on another network as well, as I mentioned before. I will update you on that later. If you're listening as a podcast, the first hour is always free, and I will talk more about supporting the show at the end of the first hour for the hour listeners. So how are you, Alejandro?
I am doing well. How are you?
Great. And before we get into the news, I want to talk about this great show. I think it's a great show that you and Lee Spiegel and I did on the year 2015 in review. And that is available on openminds.tv as well as on this blog scroll on podcastufo.com. I think that was a great show. I really, really had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's always fun to review the cases, to debate them. I think that's part of the fun, is to debate with your friends, people you can disagree with. And sometimes, just have different points of view, but still be able to discuss in a civil manner and have fun. And it's always really fun to look back at the stories of the year, because there's always incredible stories that you've forgotten.
Yeah, I was surprised because I worked on this for, like a week or so, just diving through old stories. I really didn't realize how much went on last year. It was actually quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and once it gets like 6 months old, it gets jumbled in your mind. Did that happen in 2013, 2014, earlier in 2015? It's hard to remember when something took place, at least for me and my aging mind. But so it's really cool to look back and go, hey, man, that happened in 2015. Cool. It deserves more attention, and it's fun to be able to do those shows and bring focus back on some of these cool things that happened.
Yeah, it's really amazing how a lot of things like were interwoven with things that are going on right now, and I think that's a story we're going to talk about, right?
Exactly.
Tonight? Mm-hmm. All right, so why don't we? Can you start out with that story? I think that's really an amazing one.
For sure. I was planning on starting it because I have a couple other sightings, not as exciting to talk about if you want, but of course they're on the site. But this one, like you said, weaves into so much of what happened this year, and it's kind of perfect that it happened at the end of 2015, and that is this comment by Hillary Clinton. A few weird and interesting comments by Hillary Clinton. So she visited the editorial board of the Conway Daily Sun, and they are in Conway, New Hampshire.
Which is only 40 minutes from where I sit, by the way.
You're kidding.
No, I didn't know she was over there.
Too bad you weren't there. You could have been the UFO expert.
I would have jumped right on that.
Yeah, so she was there, I guess. She had been there before answering questions. And at the end of the meeting, one of the guys, Damon Steer was his name, a reporter, decided to ask her about UFOs. He wrote that in their editorial board meeting in 2007 that Clinton had visited and that he had asked her some UFO questions, and she seemed to have fun, joking around and talking to him about it. So when he said he wanted to ask her UFO questions just last week, she said, yes, I'm going to get to the bottom of it, meaning that she's going to get to the bottom of UFOs, which, of course, so this conversation started off pretty interesting. Steers then asked her some questions about her husband's April 2014 appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live. And, of course, many of the listeners will remember that Jimmy Kimmel asked Clinton about UFOs. He had some really funny things to say. In fact, he started it off, I probably wouldn't even finish the oath. I would run to the White House. I'd demand to see all the classified files. Did you do that? I loved Obama's answer when he asked him that. He said, that is why you will never be president. But
that's pretty funny. Yeah.
Bill Clinton says he sort of did. And he goes on to talk about he looked into Roswell and Area 51 and really didn't find much. Kind of interesting. And then he just talked about extraterrestrial life and things like that. So Steer said, what about this? What about what Clinton said, looking into UFOs and stuff? And Hillary responded, I think we may have been visited already. We don't know for sure. So she said, yeah, we've been visited by aliens, essentially.
Which is really an amazing comment.
Yeah,
for a president's wife, even if, long retired and she was not doing anything at all. It's still for a president's wife, or former president's wife, I should say, and possibly a future president. It's quite a statement.
Mm-hmm. She also said she would look into Area 51. Steers does say that she called it Area 54 before correcting herself later on. And then she said that my chairman, it's well known that he's into UFOs, and that being John Podesta, the chairman of her campaign. He was also Bill Clinton's chief of staff and a counselor to President Obama. But she said, he's really into UFOs. And her quote was, he has made me personally pledge we are going to get the information out one way or another. Maybe we could have like a task force to go to Area 51. So those were her statements. Lee Spiegel asked Steers about his conversation, and he said, was she joking around? And Steers said, yeah, in the conversation, she was just having fun, and it was a lighthearted conversation. However, Steers wrote to Spiegel that given her relationship with Podesta and her husband's track record, that she might be sincere about moving forward on UFO disclosure. So, an interesting conversation. And here's another little tidbit that happened. Podesta is known for tweeting about UFOs. That's kind of how he's known about UFOs. And he's kind of, even since he started with Hillary's campaign, the day he left Obama's campaign and went to Hillary's campaign, which was in February of 2015, he said his biggest failure of 2014 was not securing the disclosure of UFO files. Then he tweeted in September, after Hillary Clinton had done an interview with Lena Dunham, he said, "Great interview, but Lena asked her about aliens next time." And just yesterday, in response to Lee Spiegel's story, because a writer for Bloomberg Politics, Jennifer Epstein, tweeted the quote that Hillary about Podesta making him pledge that they're going to get UFO information out. And John Podesta replied to that tweet, and he said, "Just in time for the X-Files revival." And just like on all his tweets about UFOs, he put the hashtag, "The truth is out there." So, yeah, of course, everybody's really excited. Lee, it's kind of funny because Lee Spiegel, who wrote about it, and I think he's partially responsible for the mainstream finally paying attention to it. He was frustrated that they hadn't yet, but there are tons of stories about it yesterday and today now, all over the place. And he's just been going crazy. He's so upset because the vast majority of these stories have been wrong. So, for instance, the CNN one wrote that Bill Clinton was on Kimmel's show in 2007. But no, that's when Steers had first asked her questions. But a number of other inaccuracies in the mainstream media, which we've talked about before. It's just so frustrating. They don't seem to need or feel the need to do their due diligence or even any fact-checking whatsoever, which is really sad and wrong because as a journalist with a work ethic, there's no reason for any story not to do, checking of your facts and being careful.
That's the first rule in journalism, I would imagine.
Yep, he's really frustrated about that. So that's been going on. Washington Post, of course, interviewed Steve Bassett. Bassett had, and they quoted, who knows, he might have said some other things, but he said something about how, I forget, Hillary was going to be, John Podesta is kind of the guy pushing disclosure, and Hillary's the conduit, but that Obama's going to be the disclosure president. And the logic eludes me in all of that, and I really don't see it. But, of course, ever since I've known Bassett, this is a year that disclosure is going to happen, and it didn't happen 10 or so years ago when I first heard him say it, or any year since. Yeah. But this is still really exciting, at least that the conversation is going on. That's for sure.
I think so, and it's probably going to snowball. One of the things I want to ask you now, we're kind of eating up a lot of time, almost our whole news time on this one thing, but I think it's kind of important. And that is, what do you think, what in your own mind do you think John Podesta is really up to? When he puts that hashtag, "The truth is out there," it's almost like he's trying to joke in a way. That's kind of how I'm taking it. Are you taking it differently?
Well, we know he's a big X-Files fan. He had an X-Files party when he worked for Clinton at the White House. Grant Cameron, who has a website, Presidential UFO, for years has been trying to get pictures of that party, and he hasn't been able to because supposedly people dress like X-Files characters. Who knows, maybe even Bill and Hillary, which would be great. But we know he's a big X-Files fan. Yeah. He spoke at a Leslie Kean press conference where he said UFO information needs to get out. That was in 2002. So he's really into UFOs. It's hard to say. I think as a public figure, he's careful about what he says. I think he's really having fun with the topic, but we really have no insight into his true thoughts about whether there are secrets or not. We know that Bill Clinton looked into whether or not there are UFOs. He's often had the caveat, that it could be that career bureaucrats are hiding information from him, and he wouldn't be the first president that has been lied to. Of course, back in while he was president, Lawrence Rockefeller was trying to get UFO information out and did some research and put together a document. I don't think there's any smoking gun there, but it's interesting. And Hillary Clinton spoke with Lawrence Rockefeller, and we have some pretty good information to say that they talked about UFOs. So I think Hillary here was trying to have fun like Obama did on the Kimmel Show, but she's just not as funny.
She doesn't have the type of humor, same type of humor, basically.
Exactly. He's really good at it, and she's not so much. She fails often when she tries to be funny. So it's really, I think it's really hard to say what any of these people really think about the topic. But one thing we do know is, at least especially with Podesta and even with Bill Clinton, that they do think of the topic and that they were open to the idea that there was something more to the UFO topic.
Right. Well, we've eaten up the whole 15 minutes here. But let's touch real quickly on the two sightings, or at least one sighting you were talking about.
Yeah, real quick. And I would like to do a little intro for Chris O'Brien.
Okay, sure, great.
This way I do it, but just...
you want to end with that?
Yeah, is that cool?
All right, sure, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, you can read the UFO stories at openminds.tv. One of them has an interesting video, but I think it might be a reflection from the window. But lots of sightings going on that Roger Marsh is writing about. But for now, get ready for your interview with Chris O'Brien on Podcast UFO.
That was it, huh?
I'm Batman, Chris O'Brien, ducking cattle mutilation. On Podcast UFO. Talk to you later, buddy.
That was perfect. Thanks so much, Alejandro, and we'll be talking to you next week.
Yep.
All right, everyone, hang in there. We'll be right back after this quick music break with Chris O'Brien. Chris O'Brien, how are you?
Good.
How'd you like that intro?
Yeah, spooky.
Well, welcome to the show. You are back. You were on, I think I was looking, it was back on show number like 80-something, and I think we've done possibly 100 more since then.
Wow.
So it was a while ago. And I had the pleasure of hanging out with you in Phoenix. We just had a lot of laughs. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, almost a year ago.
Right. I think we were talking about people, weren't we? I'm trying to remember.
Well, invariably at these events, yeah, a lot of people talk gets talked about.
Yeah. There's some colorful people at these events sometimes, and it was quite interesting.
Well, listening to Alejandro and you talk about John Podesta and Hillary and Clinton, the first thing he did when he got into office was task Webb Hubble, if you'll remember, to find out two things. Number one, are UFOs real and what do we know? And number two, who killed JFK? That was his other...
That's right. I remember he did.
That was his other request of his right-hand hatchet man, who died in jail, didn't he? Got out of jail, then died.
Yeah.
Anyway, if anybody thinks that there's going to be disclosure by the U.S. government, you are fooling yourselves. You're in complete denial of the reality of the situation, which is most UFO secrets, if you will, are probably held in the private sector, aerospace, think tanks, that sort of thing. I don't think politicians really have a need to know, even the president. I think it's military and a military-industrial complex issue, and I don't hold your breath, folks. And I'd be willing to bet somebody as much as you want.
You heard that, folks.
Not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's why we're seeing all these other countries release their information to keep the heat off the U.S. And if somebody, like Russia or China says, well, we know what the U.S. knows, I seriously doubt it. And they may know some things, and they may attempt to embarrass the United States, although I doubt it. But if they do, that's never going to explain why Ben Rich, the guy that started the Lockheed Skunk Works, said that we have pretty much anything you can imagine we can do. We've found the We figured out the formula, I think he said, or the equation rather, and we have the technology to take ET home. Comments like that from someone as high-powered as a Ben Rich should really give one pause. And, I think it bolsters the whole idea that, the government doesn't have a need to know about this stuff. It's all the aerospace folks and people that are attempting to back engineer what they think is UFO technology. And that's about all I think really needs to be said on that subject. But I would be willing to bet anybody any amount of money, Steve Bassett, Stephen Greer, how much you want to bet? I heard Stephen Greer say in 93, 90 days, I guarantee it, we'll have UFO disclosure in 90 days. And that was 22 years ago.
Well, the only thing I disagree about what you just said is I think that the Air Force, knowing that something is flying around in the skies and they have no control over it, I think that they would have some type of at least compartmentalized, maybe not actively, but at least some involvement with trying to figure out what this thing is. And I don't.
Well, sure, they have information. They have gun camera footage. They have all sorts of stuff. But, let's get real. The more you know about UFOs, the more confused you are. They know a hell of a lot more than we do, so they're a hell of a lot more confused. And it's probably not the Air Force that's a repository within the armed services. I think it's the Navy that probably has the leg up on files and data. Bobby Inman is an interesting character I think your listeners should check into. One of the board members of SAIC. Of course, he was head of Office of Naval Intelligence and was high up in the Joint Chiefs. Very interesting character. He probably is one of those people in the know. There's a number of them out there. I think John Alexander's book gives kind of a nice disinformation version of why UFO information is not really held in the type of high regard that one would think. I think that they realize there's absolutely nothing they can do, and it's not showing any sort of overt hostility. So, let's just hide our ostrich heads in the sand and keep our little pink tushies in the air, because worrying about it ain't going to make it go away, and it's not going to make it any better. I think they're as confused, more confused than we are. That's why they're more they know a little bit more, but that's why they're more confused.
Yeah, and I think that is a really good point. I think that it's very, very possible that no one here on Earth really has an answer for what it is. And it may remain that way.
Well, certainly not Billy Meyer.
What's that?
Certainly not Billy Meyer or Stan Romanek or Jim Sparks or the Honorable Paul Hellyer, who likes to quote Jim Sparks. This is a pop culture conundrum. And more people are getting their information, their education, their point of view, and their opinions from the internet, from the TV. And it's a snowball running down a hill. And there's a few of us that want to stand on the top of the hill and watch how culture responds to all this disinformation, misinformation, and blatant programming of opinion. But I think the bottom line is we'll have disclosure when whomever it is that we're talking about decides to openly reveal who they are. And I think they're more terrestrial than we are, to be honest with you. I don't think we're dealing with anything out there that would come to this violent, misogynist, totally dysfunctional place. I think we're a virus, and the biodiversity of this planet is eminently more attractive to any possible outside influence than we are. I think it's anthropomorphic of us to think we're that important. We're not. It's like what Agent Smith in The Matrix said, you're a virus. You take things over and you kill everything and you deplete the resources and you breed like rabbits. That's
kind of how we are. But
evolved,
I also think that I do think it's possible that we are being observed in what we do, even as crazy and chaotic as we are. When it comes to things like UFO sightings over, nuclear weapons and things like that, it just makes you wonder if we're not.
That's why I think it's terrestrial, because they would have vested interest in anything having to do with environmental degradation. So that's why they showed up en masse in 47 at the dawn of the nuclear age, because we all of a sudden put them in harm's way because they're already here.
Or now, are you thinking? So I want to hear more of what your thoughts are in that. Do you think? Are you speculating that it's possibly another dimension or time travel? What do you think?
It could be. Mac Tones came up with the term crypto-terrestrial. John Keel came up with the term ultra-terrestrial.
Right.
50% of all UFO sightings seem to be tied into bodies of water. I mean, people forget that there's just countless, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of UFO sightings of objects leaving and entering large bodies of water, even small bodies of water. So how do we know we're not dealing with something subterranean or sub-oceanic or, as you mentioned, possibly some sort of dimensional capability? Time travel seems a bit of a stretch, but, you can't factor anything out and you can't factor anything in. It may be all of the above plus aliens from outside the closed system here. We don't know. And until we do know, there's no point in expecting anybody to come and solve all our problems for us and, save us from ourselves or, it's just we need to do hard data monitoring. We need to get the science nailed down behind these craft. We need magnetic and gravitational data. It'd be great to get gamma radiation readings, some sort of light spectra with blazed gratings on analog optical, equipment. It'd be great to get some real good 16K or 4K high speed footage, 10,000 plus frames per second type quality images, and have it triangulated, have multiple cameras doing this. Until we get to a point where we can nail down some of the just nuts and bolts, as it were, you can speculate, from now until, the cows get mutilated and don't come home. It just doesn't matter. Obviously the military doesn't really have what appears to be an active interest in these things, although they are interested. They chase them around. I've seen it with my own eyes. But how do we know they're not chasing, our own technology that's being, pranced around and danced around to appear to be high strange? I mean, a lot of this stuff could be, our exotic technology that's being trotted out to gauge the response in the populace. We don't know.
Yeah, I'm thinking a good example of that, I would think, is the Cash Landrum case. That was probably something that went awry, with the radiation and everything. But one of the things,
Rendlesham could be something similar, which happened just a few days later.
What's that?
Rendlesham.
Oh, did that only happen? I thought they were like a year apart, a year or two apart, or. Well, yeah, I don't have my dates straight right here, but one of the things, though, going back to all the different theories that people are talking about, when it comes to some of the craft that people see that will cloak or disappear or morph into something else. I mean, a good friend of mine saw something like a box explode into 5 lights that did moved around and a jet came along and chased it away. And, so you hear of all these different things and that absolutely don't make any sense. And I've said it before in the show that maybe we can't even think of what these things are. Haven't even. Yeah.
I've shared experiences similar where a large light will break into, several lights. And the opposite, several lights becoming one light. I've seen that as well. We really don't know what the capabilities of our black projects and black budget, the black budget in this country is trillions of dollars if you start adding it up year after year. And, I mean, I love it. On September 10th, the day before 9/11, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld announced that $4.4 trillion were not where it was supposed to be, and it appeared that about half of that was missing.
Right.
Of course, the next day, the headlines would have been, just banner headlines announcing, that $2.2 trillion was missing from the Department of Defense. Yet we had 9/11 conveniently on the front pages instead.
Trump.
So,
yeah.
There's trillions of dollars that are not accounted for. Richard Sauter, who is probably one of the top researchers into the underground facility topic, has identified, I think, at least 127 known, acknowledged underground facilities. Yet he's combed through every appropriations bill for the past 30, 40 years and has not found one penny that has been allocated to build these underground facilities, the ones that we even know about. That's not even talking about the super secret ones that obviously are there that we're not aware of, whether they're COG facilities, continuation of government, whether they're, it's a vast tunnel system tying together military bases, as some have suggested, maglev trains that travel at the speed of sound, blah, blah, blah. We don't really know the extent of our technological prowess underground. I've been fast on the heels of sources and information about an ancient tunnel system that exists down here in the Southwest where I live. I've got a number of very intriguing stories, including one just near Los Alamos, the national lab there, where workers expanding the lab underground broke into an ancient tunnel system.
Really?
So we really don't know the extent of our technological capabilities. I know that there's a patent out there for a nuclear submarine that was, I think, issued in the mid-'70s that, through sediment, the thing can, go 20 to 30 miles a day through bedrock 7 by melting the rock, and instead of having a big pile of refuse shooting out behind it like a conventional diamond-tipped driller, it just melts it and coats it on the tunnel walls as a coating like glass. Do we have these things operating? Imagine the past 40 years, how many miles you could do if you could go even 3 or 4 miles a day. How many miles could be honeycombed under this country? There are a lot of areas of research that people don't take the time to dive into, and you don't, nobody is out there exhausting all more mundane explanations to explain UFOs and other anomalies. It's much easier just to think we're important enough for something out there to come here and be responsible for all this stuff. I think it's much more complicated.
Yeah. I've said that a couple of times. What makes us so important if there's life throughout the universe? Why would we be, other than being observed, with curiosity, like we would do if we had the capability of traveling to other life-bearing planets? I'm sure we would study them. But why would we be so special that there are, 100,000 sightings a year, and say, and that could very well be that there's 100,000 that are unexplained because only about 10% of them are reported, and about 10% to 30% they say are unexplained. So if that's true, let's just say roughly 30 to 100,000 undescribable UFOs, unidentifiable UFOs are here per year. Why would they be? Why would we be so special?
Exactly. I think that biodiversity, the wonderful biodiversity on this planet, it has much more of an allure and attraction to potential outsiders than the one species that's making, on average of one species extinct a day, 300 to 400 species a year that we know of are going extinct because of our rampant degradation of the environment. So, I prefer to be more conservative in my analysis of these things. You're talking to somebody that has spent many years out in the field as a field investigator, interviewing people, working with law enforcement, working with rural communities mostly, networking with other investigators and researchers, reading the books. I've got an extensive library of over 1,000 books. I really make an effort to keep up with what I consider to be important, relevant research. Of course, I have to be aware of some of the more outlandish, third phase of moon stuff. I want to see how sophisticated the hoaxers are getting with the CGI work, and to me, it's so laughable that people are posting on Facebook and other places just blatant. Hoaxes.
Before you move off of third phase of the moon, I like to bust them when I can get a chance, because they do, there's tons of videos on YouTube and from third phase of the moon, and I think about 95% of them are bogus, just for the listener out there to keep that in mind. And it's a numbers game for them because they have something like 200,000 subscribers. So they're making several $1,000s a month. So it's all about money. And so
and that's not to say that there's not real videos on there. There are real videos that are just accidentally salted, amongst the dozens and dozens and dozens of ridiculous but well done, hoaxed videos. The whole idea of 50 style Adamski beam ships or Billy Meyer beam ships and Adamski flying saucers. That is one of the best things that ever really happened to the world of photographic UFO analysis, because you can instantly tell if somebody is just going on a sort of an idealized cultural meme image of what a UFO is, and it's very, very easy to pick apart instantly at just a single glance the hoaxes. Some of the more complicated ones, for anyone that works in videos, such as myself. I mean, I'm in the business of producing video and do know a lot about it. There are some telltale signs to look for, certain kinds of pixelation. But, again, with a super highly compressed YouTube signal, that has a tendency to hide some of the deficiencies of the hoaxes, and it actually aids them. And depending on the type of hoax it is, sometimes it's detrimental to the image as well. There have been some very good ones. The Jerusalem object shooting off above the Temple. Dome of the Rock. That was very impressive, very well done, and they came up with 2 other videos, I believe, to help support it. It was a hoax, but very well done. A lot of people oohed and awed over the Haitian video coming over the beach and over the palm trees.
That's one of the
obvious hoax, but very, very well done.
I think there's 20, or I can't remember how many millions. There's millions and millions of views on that one.
Yeah.
I forget.
And a lot of people just still think that that's real, and that's what a real spaceship looks like. Dang, man.
That's right.
It's just the whole idea of pro bono proctologists coming here and reaming people's rear ends out for free. The proctologist union should be pretty indignant by now. You start stealing business from particular specialists, and there's hell to pay.
I did want to say, while we were the name Billy Meyer came up a few times for the listener. By the way, we're on with Chris O'Brien, and if you're listening live, please jump into the chat room and pose a question if you have one. We have a couple of them up there. I'm going to get to in a little bit, but Billy Meyer just came up a minute ago, and for the listener, I do have a blog that I've written recently on Billy Meyer, and just saying, that if there was ever the world's longest UFO hoax award, it should be given to Billy Meyer. Now, on my website, for 3 or 4 years, I had a picture of one of his UFOs, and I didn't even know until Michael Horn contacted me and said, "Hey, you don't have copyright to have that image." And I go, "Oops, I didn't even know I had that image on there." So he made some really good-looking UFO videos for the time he did, with mostly basically
they were
plates.
film. It wasn't video. It was film. Big difference.
What's that? That's right, film.
They were film.
Yeah, 8mm or 16mm. And, he used fishing line. It's kind of proven. And, you can see a garbage can lid in one of his flying saucers. And you can actually see in crystal clear pictures of them. You can see that they were actually plates and things like that. A lot of household objects.
My favorite was the wedding cake.
Oh, yes. That's the one that had the trash can lid on it, I think. Pretty sure.
Yeah. Oh, Michael Horn. Oh, man. Everybody's least favorite part of the brass section.
Well, I had a little back and forth. After I wrote this blog, I was contacted by someone, had a little bit of a back and forth, and they said that poor Michael Horn, he really buys into it. He really believes it. And I don't know. I'm not convinced that it's kind of like a religion or a cult that, the followers,
kind of,
deep in their heart, they actually know, but they stick to it anyway. I think that's what Michael Horn is.
Right. And all the prophecies that he claims he makes that come true, of course, they are only announced after the event occurs.
Yeah. That's always good to do. I think, and I posted this on that blog, and I know we're kind of getting in like a negative area here, but still, it's interesting. On that
you gotta
blog,
call a spade, man.
Yeah, on that blog, I just posed some pictures that he had in a book, and it was for these. Let's see if I can just find that real quickly. It was for two girls that of aliens that he took pictures of, and they were actually two women on the Dean Martin show at the time, and it was too late by the time he put them in the he put them in a book, printed them in a book. So I think it's kind of interesting when people always have like a backup. And it was Asket and Nira. That's who it was. And it ended up being Michelle, Michelle Delafave and Susan Lunn from the Dean Martin show. And he just blurred the picture. And those were the aliens. Now, he put them in his book, published the book. And then when it came out that these were indeed, Dean Martin stars, that's when he came up with the story that Men in Black came in and changed the pictures and anything. He's just got these great stories that he comes up with. And, he looks like a very happy man and nice man, but I think that, he's been getting money from supporters for years.
Yeah, well, he has the little bliss bunnies come, do his laundry, cook for him, tend his garden, hold it when it needs to be held and let go when it needs to be let go of. Hey, the guy's got a good gig going. Who am I to argue except to say the guy is, a fraud. That's not to say he hasn't had real experiences. I think early on in the 60s, I believe in India, if memory serves me correct, and possibly early on in Switzerland when he came back, that he did have some real experiences. But just like the contactees of the 50s, they think they're singled out and that they're special, and they have to keep coming up with new stories, new sightings, new claims. Just like the people in the UFO field that make their money and pay their bills with their UFO work. Every 6 months, they got to come up with a new story. They have to continually top themselves. They have to, make sure that the mirror is big enough for the size of their heads and their hairdos, and it's very similar. I don't have much respect for that aspect of the field. In fact, it makes me embarrassed if everybody, anybody says, "Oh, you're here. I want to introduce you to my friend who's a ufologist." I immediately spank them and say, "Don't lump me in with those crazy people," because a lot of this field is, there's a reason why academia and the scientific community doesn't want to get slimed.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people out there that don't know their ass from a hole in the ground. People that write books and are on TV that don't know their ass from a hole in the ground about this subject. They really don't. And, people that buy into, some of these scenarios, Andrew Basiago, yes, I was a time traveler. I went back to the Gettysburg Address and as a child, or Laura Eisenhower, and some of these people. It's just, I can't believe anybody takes this stuff.
Well,
seriously.
I think there's also a situation here where people are not going to like when I say this, but I think sometimes that, and this is not my own thinking totally, but I do, when you say something like this, there's like UFO can be a religion. And, there's a friend and fan of the show that has talked about this. I've talked about this with her a few times. And it can kind of be, I think that people are always, there's a certain segment of society that is always looking for something, and I don't mean that, my listeners to the show or anything like that. I just mean that there is a segment out there that is looking sort of lost and looking for something. And
why is that, Martin? I mean, think about it. Why is that? Because these patriarchal, long past their due time, monolithic religions of Judeo-Christianity and Islam, have subjugated and controlled people with intermediaries between the individual and their own divinity and their own connection to spirit. We have all these intermediaries that are there to control everybody, and it's outmoded. This whole belief system of some guy in the sky with a big white beard, passing judgment over and. Whether he's in a good mood in the Old Testament, or a bad mood in the Old Testament, or a better mood in the New Testament. I mean, we really need to understand that these are outmoded belief systems, and people are looking for something more that they can relate to. And, ETs and aliens are a perfect substitute. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I stand up in front of some of my conference audiences and say, don't you realize you're all sitting there looking at me, and you're in the pews of a new church of the 21st century. Can I get an amen? And then there's stunned silence, and I have to yell, brothers and sisters, can I get an amen? And then, of course, they start, amen, amen, It's like, testify. It's obvious to me. It's not kind of like a religion. It is. It's a belief system that is evolving into a space age. Benevolent space brothers are coming here to solve all our problems and fix everything for us type myopia. It's just myopic, man.
It goes back to Adamski and George Van Tassel and
sure, Daniel Fry, George Hunt Williamson. My favorite of those guys was Truman Bethune. I think his case may have been real.
Can you explain that one? I'm not sure if I know who that is.
Oh, Truman Bethune and Ora Raines, a little 4-foot woman commander of the ship, and he wrote an entire book of rhyming couplet poetry. Love poetry to her. Now, if it was a hoax, you think he'd spend all that time to write a love poem that was a whole book's worth of rhyming couplets to the diminutive commander of the spaceship, Ora Raines? I've done some research on that. There's some supportive evidence of the case that are pretty interesting, including some artifacts and other things. I actually have a signed copy of a border flying saucer that Bethune signed. One of my kind of old, I think it may be the first book with the word flying saucer in the title. I'm not sure. Definitely one of the first couple.
So it sounds like you have quite a library. Have you been collecting earlier UFO books?
Yeah, for many, many, many years, since way before I got involved to the extent that I am today. And books on all sorts of things, mysterious locations, the works of Charles Fort, cryptozoology, the occult, all sorts of, mysterious subject matter. I have tons and tons of books.
Someone just wrote on the...
That's why I hate to move.
I bet, yeah. Books are the hardest. Someone just wrote on the message board, you need to do a UFO hoax show. 2 hours blast on Roswell Slides, Project Pegasus, and Billy Meyer. That would be fun.
Let's talk about Serpo, and we can talk Corey Good, and like I said before, Basaggio, and some of the just ridiculous inanities from Alfred Weber. Some of the bizarre stuff that David Wilcock comes up with, and David Sereda. We won't even talk about Sean David Morton. Some of Linda House stuff. It's just, it's amazing to me that these people get millions of people tuning in and believing this stuff.
That's when you were talking about the hairdo. That's why I laughed.
Well, I was thinking Richard Hoagland too. His like the Warren Zevon song, and his hair was perfect.
Well, yeah, and now Richard Dolan. Yes, I'm going to pick on him too.
No, Rich is letting his hair grow. He wants to be a chick magnet. I think.
Yeah, he looked pretty free and happy last year at the UFO conference that we both were at. Now, I am getting a lot of messages up on the message board that people want to talk about cattle mutilations. We're almost at the top of the hour. But so I do have, I'm going to, if you don't mind, we'll shift gears and we'll talk a little bit about that. And
I'm I hate to sound like a naysayer, but I'm just so disgusted by a vast majority of what passes as ufology. I just can't help it. I can't help to be down on it. And it's an embarrassment to be associated with the subject in any way, shape, or form at times. It really is. I'm getting tired of it's like, I feel like with Rodney Dangerfield's, red-haired stepchild.
It's funny when I talk to a lot of people that have been at it for as long and longer as you, not all of them, but a lot of them kind of have the same attitude, and I've heard, someone say we have to drain the swamp in ufology, and a lot of people, just get burned out. And there was someone I wanted to talk to the other day. I was looking him up on the Hopkinsville Kelly case or whatever it is, way back. There was someone doing some great research on that. And when I finally got through people like Kurt Collins that knew of him and all that, he said, oh, yeah, he left the UFO field and will have nothing to do with it. There are people that just get burned out and have seen the changes, and just spoke with Lee Spiegel yesterday, and he was basically saying the same thing. He's been at it a long time too, since the early 70s. So it does. It takes the twists and turns, but I think you're right about pop culture does. There is interaction with what is pop culture, and
people have it in their mind's eye, I think subconsciously, what it is that makes them excited and makes them want to believe. And if they hear something that conforms to that sort of unconscious desire, then they give it attention. They feed into it, and it's a feedback loop. And if you start, it's what did Joseph Goebbels say? If you say the same lie over and over and over again, people take it as the truth.
All right, since we're talking on this, I oftentimes pick on someone you mentioned earlier, and that's Dr. Stephen Greer. Now, he is an example to me, and a lot of times I get hate mail when I talk about this, and that's okay. But he is someone that I thought started out actually pretty decent, and made some really good efforts, and but he's someone just like what you're talking about.
I met Stephen 22 years ago, and he was a man on a mission. His right hand, Girl Friday managing director, Sherry Adamak, was one of my best friends after I met her. And like I told him 22 years ago, in front of a bunch of really wealthy, very powerful and influential people, some associated with Lawrence Rockefeller, others associated with some big East Coast money, I told him, my point blank, I said, Stephen, your message is way more important than you are. And he goes, whoa, and I said, no, Stephen, here, let me say this again, okay? Your message is way more important than you are. And when you start talking megalomania and, you know, just rampant egoicism or whatever the word is, egotism, and all the grandstanding that goes along with it, you become, and intellectual dishonesty, I mean, let's get real, you become a major part of the problem. And, you know, I support Stephen's vision and his, not so much his message anymore, but I did early on. You know, I can see the importance of trying to get proactive and all these types of things that he attempts to do, but not everybody lay their hands on the doctor and he'll be the intermediary to channel the aliens down. And, you know, when you really start interjecting yourself as the linchpin for any scenario involving ufology, except with the exception of Ray Stanford, you become highly suspect and compromised. Right.
And Ray, I'm sure he's listening. He listens to every show, I believe. Really like Ray a lot.
Ray is the only person in ufology that really matters, as far as I'm concerned.
Wow, that's quite a statement.
He's the only one doing the work to the extent that it needs to be done. And when he finally decides to reveal, you know, years of analysis that he's been doing, it's going to be a whole new ball game. I mean, there's going to be, I guess, BR and AR, before Ray and after Ray. And I don't say that lightly. I'm not a disciple of Ray. I'm not a true believer of Ray. I don't genuflect at the altar of Ray. I just know good scientific work when I see it.
Yeah.
And Ray's the only person that even comes close to even being in this conversation.
Right. Yeah, I think he's absolutely brilliant. Really. I'm not just saying that if you're listening, Ray. But, all right, I wanted to get into the cattle mutilations. We only have about 4 or 5 minutes left in this hour. But so let me just pose this one question, and that was the first question that went up on the message board. Someone wanted an update on your camera capture UFO data project in the San Luis Valley.
Well, like everything, it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. We have the gear. We have a team that's gone ahead and taken our Real Shot Manager software, which is the proprietary software that Sony released for security cameras. And what they've done is they've put it on steroids and supercharged it so that instead of 15 pixels being the smallest movement on the screen that will, you know, be registered as motion, we've gotten it way down to a small packet size. And so there's been some real major work done in the software. Right now what we're doing is we're setting up a base station near Alamosa, Colorado, which is in the very center of the valley. We're talking about getting it up on a fairly high telephone pole that has a special type of apparatus that allows us to bring the camera down without having to climb up and grab it so that we can clean the bird droppings off, because that's been a problem with these dome cameras. Birds love to sit on them, and of course they end up doing their thing on them too and obscuring our view. So it's been fits and starts. My base station guys ran through kind of a rough summer. His wife was involved in a bad automobile accident, and he got called out of work, town on work, and so we've been kind of put behind our schedule right now. But there's also talk of working with Leslie Kane and Mark Rodiger. Of course, Mark
really?
was a long time from CUFOS. They have a similar type of idea called UFO data. And we had him on the Paracast, my radio show, and they seem very interested in working with us. I've also been in touch with Mark D'Antonio, who is the official digital video analyst for MUFON, who's working with Douglas Trumbull in UFOCAT. That's another possible alliance that we're going to have. I think that we have done quite a bit of research and development work In terms of software and trying to get off, affordable off-the-shelf equipment. We have all the gear we need. It's just a matter of IDing IDing the proper locations and having people there to actually tend to the gear. It's one thing to have a bunch of cameras set up and a base station. It's another thing to have it properly manned. And so the next thing that we're planning on doing is doing a Kickstarter campaign and getting the necessary operating funds so that we can then, pay people, to do things instead of just relying on their free time. That approach hasn't worked, so we're going to go to a GoFundMe type thing and have some cash. I think we do have, a very interesting and well thought out idea, and I think it will attract the kind of public attention and scrutiny that will, enable us to get some funding. It's not that expensive to do this now in this day and age. The cameras we have now are almost obsolete. I mean, we're just up at high def. The real problem in rural areas, though, is bandwidth. And now that the San Luis Valley is finally getting the kind of T2 lines and really good bandwidth, now we have recourse. We're also playing with an idea of having a completely closed circuit LAN, our own LAN, so that we don't have to rely on the internet and possibly allow software to be compromised from outside and that sort of thing. So we're looking at it. We're looking at having both a live feed for the cameras and having an internal closed loop system for the 3 cameras.
Yeah, I think a question just came up on the message board, but I believe you just answered that. Someone was asking how you plan to link the base station's video stream. So I guess you just answered that. And they also said that you should put an alien-looking scarecrow up on top.
Well, we actually have a mechanical owl that when a bird gets close, motion detector goes off and the owl turns its head and hoots.
Oh, my goodness, because that's what you always see like on boats and things when they're trying to keep birds away.
Exactly.
Wow, great. All right, well, we're going to talk in hour 2 about, with a bunch of questions up there about cattle mutilations and all that stuff. So, all right, you can say goodbye to the hour 1 people if you would.
Bye, hour 1 people. Okay. Get a subscription for hour 2. I'm going to no holds barred.
That was pretty good. All right, that's it for hour 1. And if you'd like to support the show, to listen to hour 2, the full show, it gets pretty interesting. And that will cost $2 a month or more. Unfortunately, I had to go up from the $1 minimum because PayPal takes a chunk of the first $1. So you can also support the show for one payment a year as low as $25. So if you'd prefer to do that, that's all on our website, podcastufo.com. I want to thank a few people for the show tonight. First of all, Evan helped out with the sound. Peggy Shunning helps out with the Facebook page. Remember, you can like us on Facebook for all the latest UFO news. Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse for the music. And next week, we have Mike McClellan on, and he tells an unusual story about owls and alien abductions. It's kind of a different type of show next week, but I hope you come back, and you'll see us live anytime for free, the whole entire show. Just go to podcastufo.com on Wednesdays at 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks a lot, everyone, and we'll be talking to you next week. Keep your eyes to the sky.